there's a very tricky games don't have right now, sort of secondary payment based on success for actors, right? And that was not part of our bargaining package. I'm not talking about getting them right now, but I am talking about a secondary effect of that. The secondary effect of that, right, is that you are working session to session, that's all you'll see, that the size of your role matters, that and many of us are so efficient. I finished many games in one session, 4 hours, right? And no matter how successful they were, how much money they made, and I'm not complaining, but I'm saying that like the impact of this is a scarcity mindset and sort of like a brick by brick kind of need.
Welcome back to the Game Developer Podcast. I'm Brian Francis, Senior Editor at Game Developer. We're recording today's episode less than 24 hours after members of the Actors Union SAG-AFTRA successfully ratified the new interactive media agreement with major video game publishers like Disney, Activision, Take-Two, EA, etc. The contract sets employment standards for voice actors and performance capture artists in the video game industry and contains new provisions for increased pay, set safety standards, and most notably, the use of generative AI technology. We've got more specifics on the contract itself if you head to www.gamedeveloper.com. It took 3 years and an 11-month strike to sign this deal. Leading the charge from SAG-AFTRA's side of the table was Interactive Media Negotiating Committee Chair Sarah Elmaleh, who's today's guest on our podcast. Sarah is an exceptional voice actor who stepped into the role of union negotiator, a tall task for someone who started her career doing vaudeville acts out of the back of a box truck in Brooklyn. There's plenty developers can learn from her work as a negotiator and her career as an actor. This was a really fun conversation. Hopefully you'll walk away as inspired as I was to hope for a better world. And Sarah, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Oh, I just cut you off. Hello. Hi. Thank you so much. I'm good. I'm good today. Today I'm good.
You were so excited you just had to cut me off right there. You were just ready to go.
Yep. Just all a buzz is me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Nothing weird's happening today, right? Not a huge historic day for you and the union that you fought so hard for 3 years.
I don't even know. Yeah, I think physically and mentally and emotionally, I'm still processing. It's sort of surreal. It's surreal. Yeah.
It has to be, right? I was going to ask you how's it feel, but I guess you kind of answered, which is
yeah.
It's surreal,
I'll let you know, in a week. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you've this is actually kind of a weird question because for you guys, this is historic, right? Like you've won something, you've set contract terms that are going to shape, life for actors and mocap performers and for other video game performers. But also, we've all unfortunately lived through a lot of historical firsts in our lifetime. And I guess how does this feel compared to some of the other ones we've lived through? I don't know. A lot of the other ones aren't positive, but I guess when you're in the moment, how do you feel, I guess?
Oh my gosh. I wish that I had sort of glowing. I get, like I said, I'm still I've been the way that I got through this process, and especially as long as it took, was to be really task focused and next sort of assessing where are we now, especially as as pressure ratchets up in the course of negotiations. You're like, all right, what's the now? What do we, we've held on this, we've held on that, we want that. This is the goal. But what are we working with right now? And what are we looking at moving forward? So I've been really next. It's funny because the weight of it was not lost on me. The size of it wasn't lost on me. The historic necessity of it wasn't lost on me. But the outcome, the way that my body kind of digested that and was okay, so what's next? So this is really important. What's next? So now I'm without a what's next, it's just oh, I guess life is next. Life is next now. And continued, of course, discussion and negotiation, with we can't, afford to put down forever. This is we put these blueprints down or guardrails down and some use cases and kind of interests and desires did present themselves over the 3 years of talking about this. It went from very theoretical to the point where employers didn't want to talk about it at all to now having some more clarity of what they want to try to do. And I think that kind of presented itself in negotiations, but it is still a question of there's still a question in the air of what people actually want to do with this and how it's going to play out at scale. So gosh, yeah, I don't know. So yeah, we have to stay in conversation about it. It's not like it's totally done. We'll get more answers. More will be revealed, as they say in some circles. So yeah.
In certain TV circles. I'm going to ask a silly question, which is in the middle there, you talk about laying down blueprints. In the last few months, have you had time to play the critically acclaimed game Blueprints that stole everyone's hearts earlier this year? Have you gotten to play it?
Yes, I have. I feel guilty because I have not had the bandwidth as negotiations got more and more intense toward the finish line. I was not. Folks who listen to my podcast, Eggplant: The Secret Lives of Games, will know that I have not been as present as I would like to be for every episode of our UFO 50 series. So I have been playing a bit of Blueprints, and I feel like I've been cheating on my podcast, and now that's public. So apologies, friends.
Oh no.
I know, but I had a friend, and actually a committee friend who was like really, it was kind of our decompression social time. And so playing that together was really important, I think, as time went on, because it reminds us it's wild. Like, we're doing this big, huge, important, massively stressful thing for video games and for video game performance and all of that. And our way of decompressing is playing video games. Like, it's just, it's all games. It's all games all the time. Like, we love this so much that's why we fight for it. And so it feels correct, actually, to decompress and to like restore our souls and to, ignite our interest in this medium by doing the thing that we're fighting for. So no voiceover in Blueprints, but nonetheless, as far as I know. No, that's not true. There's a bit of voiceover.
No, I was going to say there's a little.
Yeah, there totally is, and it's good. Yeah, it's very good.
It comes in so surprisingly.
Yeah.
There's like those creepy
jump scare. Yeah.
This game is like almost low key a horror game, because you're like, you're going through, and then all of a sudden voiceover, and you're just like. Which is that's the power of voiceover, right? Like, even if it's not everywhere in a game, is a sudden voice appearance can mean everything. That's
true, and it also, like, whether there's a ton of voiceover or a little bit, you notice it, and you notice the quality of it and how it makes you feel immediately. And it's very effective, the voiceover in Blueprints, but for the record. Yeah. But so I have actually been playing Blueprints, and I'm not a roguelike girly, so it's like, this is, it's been fun. I look forward to maybe talking about it more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like every developer can relate to the fact that, I work in video games. I love playing video games. Oh my God, there are too many video games. And, there's a lot of work stuff that can make it hard to keep up. And I certainly, when your job is, making something and you go play something, do you have a different relationship to that thing you're playing than you do when the thing you're working on is negotiation, and it's not creative per se? It's not making something. It is going to a very difficult table. Like, did you feel any shift between how your downtime felt compared to your regular acting work?
I noticed that shift more on the professional side. Like, truthfully, I did not. It was harder for me to switch into a creative mode professionally as an actor. And then back and forth with negotiation chair. Like, that was really difficult for me. Like, my other members of my committee, bless their souls and congratulations, and I love them and they're awesome. But because they kept working, they just and they brassed back immediately. They're like hustling. They managed to like just stay booked and blessed and busy while doing this really stressful thing. But for me, switching from, and I've said this before, I think in interviews, that like switching between tactical sort of strategic negotiation brain and like, let me trot out my inner child and be vulnerable for the world. Like that sort of dynamic or mind state was really difficult for me to shift in and out of. So I just kind of wasn't auditioning and I wasn't really doing it. So that I noticed more than a shift between. And also I think I was playing a lot of indies, and I think the sort of separation, knowing that I'm negotiating mainly across from these very, very, very large companies, whose games I frankly love and love playing and love working on. But nonetheless, like I stopped playing as many AAA games in that time, and indies felt like a separate, cozy, quiet zone for some reason. So that separation was really helpful to me and was really comforting to me.
Yeah.
And now I look forward to getting back to playing AAA games that I've missed out on since this began. So.
Well, there's a AA game you may have heard of called Clair Obscure Expedition 33 that I highly recommend.
Yes.
Apparently it's the future of games, or not. I don't know.
I love when we get those. I love when suddenly the future's revealed. Yes.
Apparently the future is very French, is what I'm learning.
No, I watched another friend play some of it actually, and I was like, this music is amazing. Like, that was about the time I had to soak up what was going on, but immediately I was like, this music is fire. What is this?
I have a friend who every time we meet and start talking about the game, he goes, have you re-listened to the lyrics to this song from like later in the game? And I go, yes, Austin, I know. know, the song is amazing, the lyrics are powerful, yada yada yada. Like,
Right.
we just give him
Right.
so much guff now about like he is just so in love with
Have you
this
heard about
song.
it? Have you heard about Claire Obscure? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Have you heard of Final Fantasy 14? These all the memes.
Yeah.
Kind of, we just sort of talked about tactical versus personal, and one of the tactical things you had to bring to the table here literally was the art of negotiation. It's a delicate skill. I think, we all practice it some way or another in our lives, but, here, like, I don't want to the stakes are high, but I also don't want to, like, put them sky high, like this wasn't like nuclear disarmament.
Right, sure.
Maybe felt like that.
Right. There's a lot of other stakes floating around right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes literal stakes too, just floating stakes. It's weird out there, man. But as an actor, like, you're at the negotiating table. You're not just like a lawyer representing actors, right? You are an actor. Right. You have a personal investment in every word that goes down in the contract. How did you, when you were in there, what was your thought process for like approaching the people across from you at the table? Is not just like, they are your, antagonist per se, but they are not necessarily your enemy, right? Like there is a collaboration. How did you sort of keep that in mind as you were going through what were probably some occasionally like tense moments, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, there are folks that I across in the actual bargaining group, not as just as companies, but as human beings that I loved to work with. Some of my most treasured like professional relationships. And so I haven't checked in with them since this process, and I look forward to. Yeah, I know. Like I want to sort of check in and be like, how are we? Because I do love them. I love working with them, and I think that their values, like as individuals, in terms of like taking care of actors, are really real. So the way that because I'm not a combative person, I don't think. I mean, gosh, I don't think so. Like I don't live to fight. I don't like love to be in conflict at all. So for me, I think it really is, this is going to sound cheesy or like Instagram self-care, self-help energy, but like it really is a mark of healthy relationships to be able to set boundaries that are real and enforced or enforceable, and still be in meaningful connection to each other and to respect each other and care about each other. Like I think, in fact, it's the absence of holding that kind of line or listening or caring or respecting that there are lines here and there are considerations here, and that's something that workers have the right to, or people have the right to have a need and to assert that need in this context and still want to be in connection. It's the absence of the ability to do that is a mark of toxic relationships, right? So that's sort of like maybe a cheesy way to look at it, but I didn't see that as being at odds to be like, hey, I love what I do. I really love what I do, and I'm here because I love what I do. I'm volunteering my time. All of these people. And it's not just me negotiating, right? I've got a team of staff who are incredible. Our chief negotiator, Ray Rodriguez, is freaking ace. Love that guy. It's amazing that he's like, I feel like I finally cracked the code. I was like, why is Ray working for us and not getting paid so much bank to be somewhere else? And I was like, oh, he's the child of hippies. It's just in his blood. Like he cares. I was like, yes. Oh man, Ray. So we've got a team of staff. We've got, 14 actors like me who love this work and who are devoting their time to doing this, of different opinions and different kind of corners, not only in the entertainment industry, but different disciplines in games performance. So it's really not just me to consider, first of all, when we're talking about negotiating, is there is compromise and debate and what might seem like conflict on our own side too, and I'm sure on the other side as well. So there's compromise in kind of all directions. Like I'm creating a compromise to represent not only the committee body but the membership body, and then I'm also compromising or seeking compromise while also really staying focused on what's quote unquote non-negotiable. That's not really, but what's most important, what's really crucial, what we really can't, what's really grievous to kind of start to chip into. So yeah, and I think actually our committee experience was really that process of having debate even in our own room was really kind of life-changing for me, actually. I don't think I'd been in a context where like personally, or in my life or in my family or whatever, where conflict was, and like really passionate, heated debate was allowed, where people's moods were kind of accepted. People were allowed to be a little bit messy and kind of not perfect and everyone knew at the bottom of their soul that like it was coming from a place of wanting to do right by actors, and because they really believed that was what was needed to be safe and good and ethical. And then to kind of reset and move on, and to have the thing, to resolve it through a vote or to resolve it however it was going to resolve, and then move on and still love and care about each other. So that was actually really powerful for me to see and to experience. And I was gifted that grace by my committee, and I extended that grace to, we all gave it to each other. So that leads me to think that like this, this is something that can work. So I don't, I'd be interested to hear from them. I'm sure there was an incredible amount of pressure on their side and within their room. I don't know if they have such a, glowing kind of perception of this experience or of conflict in general or whatever it might be. But that was how it felt to me. I never felt like it was inappropriate or icky, or like stepping into the realization that you can hold accountability, that you can advocate for yourself without it being, disastrous for your relationships or for yourself, was really important to me to learn.
Yeah. During this process, especially during the strike, which started a year ago, but like the work stoppage ended about a month ago. I believe the union repeatedly said that the terms around generative AI were sort of a thing that just kept being a sticking point and a point where things sort of stopped. Is that accurate? Is it still accurate to say that like generative AI was the thing that took the most work to break ground on, find compromise on? Is it still accurate to say that?
And when we talk about generative AI, we're talking about all of the use of AI to create performance. Is that right? Or do you mean a subset? Okay. Yeah. I mean, we had at the time of our, let's see here. So we negotiated for a very long time, very methodically. We all worked through like, there were 25 total proposals brought by, combined both sides. And we sort of chugged along and we were like, well, AI is the most important thing. When are we going to talk about that? And they're like, not yet. We're like, or not at all, or whatever it might be. So that was a long, we're like, okay, all right, well, there's other stuff to tackle. We'll tackle those first. Okie dokie. And so that took a long time. And then at the time of our strike authorization, which would have been late 2023, I think, or even fall 2023, right?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. Then we still didn't have resolution on 3 pretty serious issues, including AI. So AI was the biggest one that we didn't really have movement on yet. And then we had wages to keep pace with inflation, because inflation is, because 15%, it is high. And it seems, on ratification, it seems very high, but it's also just what we asked for was basically a reflection of inflation, so that we weren't taking a real a real wage cut in terms of buying power, right? So, so a wage, wages to keep pace with inflation, and of course physical safety for folks who are doing movement performance, because they didn't have 5 minutes encoded, like enshrined in the contract. Like there was no official break in place for them. So 5 minutes per hour for them, and a set medic on set if they're doing hazardous work. I think just because there aren't speeding cars or actual fire or whatever it might be that you're doing stunts or things like that, dangerous work on a film set, doesn't mean that you can't seriously injure yourself. Look at me. I mean, I did this doing laundry. I'm a goop. I mean, like I don't know.
For the audio listeners, Sarah just raised her wrist up. There's a wrist brace there.
Got a brace. Like, oh my God.
Laundry inflicted.
Please. Yeah, just so ridiculous. Lord above. Being old is not fun. But yeah, so our movement performers are doing sometimes hundreds of falls a day, is one, or maybe about 100 or so falls a day, and or they're doing tactical reloads with, realistically weighted guns. I saw shredded fingers. Like, I was hearing about stress, repetitive stress injuries. So, we really needed to have a serious discussion about having more safety. I think it's, in some cases, these sort of safety conditions are kind of winged or just sort of guessed at, or they ask the stunt people on the day, like, what do you need? And you're like, well, we need professional riggers. We need like real safety equipment. Like, what do you mean? So those 3 things were in our strike authorization package, or group. And that is what we put out to membership to say, hey, we're not getting movement on this. And we want to know if you'd be willing to strike over this. And then the result, as you know, was quite high, 98% or so. And then we continued to bargain in hopes of not having to strike for months. This was a long strike and a grueling strike. I think, and things got quite intense toward the end, as I think they may be wont to do. But it was not for lack of trying to bargain in good faith for as long as possible, without having to resort to the use of that tool. But by the time we went on strike, it really was just the AI provision that was left. So the entirety of the strike was deep in the weeds, and trading language back and forth. Like, I mean, when you're starting from scratch, it was like setting a whole paradigm, right? And we had, it took a lot of work and time, obviously, to come from our vision of what that would look like and their vision of what that would look like, to create a compromise that is the tentative agreement that you see. So, coming from nothing in place to what we have now, is what that process was like.
Absolutely. What I thought was interesting reading the final terms was that the AI terms were not so much about banning or restricting use of the technology, but it was about a mix of, like a combination of consent and compensation for when data is used afterward. How did you guys sort of how did your side of the table arrive at a point where you looked at that and said, yeah, this is actually what we want, right? Because I could easily see a reason to do a hard no or a hard stop or some very hard terms on it, but you guys chose to end at a point where that has to do with, okay, people will do jobs and their voices will be preserved and their data can be reused, and we're going to use that as our framework as opposed to something else. So I guess, like, how did you sort of get to that point?
I mean, and that's also, for the record, like, that's where we started. Like, the question of like banning this or prohibiting it altogether was not where we ever started in bargaining. So we were always, I mean, I always saw that as a very, sort of amenable approach, was to not start from a place of y'all can't use this at all, to, that was never on the table. It was always like, how do we make this work for both of us? And that was when I talk about compromise on our own side, that is what I mean. I mean, we had folks who really were very upset, and I understand why, that we would allow the use of this, of technology, in our contracts, and sort of allow it into our work and our industry. And then other folks who were kind of curious or amenable to it, who were like, well, I don't know, if I have a vocal or digital or like a physical stunt double, maybe that would be interesting, that it would sound like me and extend my performance, but it would save my instrument, because we do shred our tissue to create.
Yeah, I've always going to say I've heard of a lot of, that's been one of the strongest use cases I've heard for AI technology for voice actors is, if this were done in the best way possible, it would help you not have to like scream 5 versions of reloading, and 5 is a minimum, right? Like, we're talking 50, right. 500, yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, and in theory, tweaking a few variations of that is healthier for you but then pay steps in, right? So that's my good faith view on it, I guess.
Yeah, and that was ours as well. For me to bridge the gap between folks who are interested in or curious about this technology as a way of supplementing their income or relieving their voice or their body, and the folks who are just completely allergic to its use at all and find it just violating in principle, that the compromise to me always felt, and this is what we brought to the table from day one, was let's give you let's make it contractually required for you to recreate this sort of amount of agency and autonomy that you have in your life now in your day of work as an actor, doing this as a human being, and so that means levels of information, kinds of information that you would get, that you now get now in advance, and then also that you get on the day. So it's actually an additional kind of a higher standard of information, and this was part of what we had to advocate for. Was like, we actually need a bit more information, because there's stuff that we wouldn't know until we're in a session. And you ask me to do something, and I'm like, oh, actually, I don't think I can do that, either for ethical reasons or performance reasons or voice, whatever reason. There is technically, logistically, I need to provide it to you, and that's a choice that I can make even once I've been hired. And obviously, we all do everything most of us, I think the majority of this community does what they do because they love it. And so it's never really out of it's not often, I think, out of being precious or just sort of, there's always a reason behind it. Maybe there are exceptions, but I think this community generally is pretty amenable, just wants to do what the developer needs and to offer as much coverage as they want. So yeah, so I think that oh, I just totally lost my train of thought. But we were talking about compromise, weren't we?
Well, the question, no, you know what? The train pulled into the station, and maybe the
Did
conductor
it?
looks a little confused. But
Yeah,
there's a
totally.
train.
Did I land that
We
plane?
ne-
Are we alive?
we now have to move to another train station. Question. I don't
Sure,
know.
we have to
Midway
transfer.
through, we're good at this. Midway
Yeah.
through, you mentioned
My brain's a little
something.
toast.
Something occurred to me about thinking about how actors view AIs. You're part of SAG-AFTRA. You're part of a union that also went on strike in 2023, partly over the terms of AI, although also wages were a huge part of that story. And it occurred to me midway through that some of your peers work in a field where if you could recreate if someone's a voice actor back in, film TV theatrical, they are, performing sets of lines for a linear medium, and
Right.
there's a narrower space, I guess, for them to even exist in. And in games, there are, whether it's a first-person shooter where you're recording so many barks so that it sounds unique as often as possible, to a procedural game where you want interesting dynamic lines reading, this field does require something so different. So I guess, like, as you were collaborating with your SAG-AFTRA peers who don't work in the field, like, I guess, like, what was it like introducing them to some of these like strange needs that like video game has for voice stuff? Like, what was that like?
I mean, there was a moment, I think repeatedly, we needed to kind of reestablish and advocate both within our own room and then across the table for nailing down the concept of, now we've come to call it real-time generation of performance, right? Which is a chat bot, essentially, or a movement bot of some kind, which meaning just any performance that's generated as the player is playing a game, and sort of explaining what that is, or explaining what procedural dialogue is from an umbrella. It started, actually, where we were like, you know what? Until we hear from you, bargaining group and players, that you want to use this isn't included. So, like, we'll not include this. We can table this if you want, because every time we include and start to cover the breadth of stuff, it means digging into weeds. And so if you don't actually want to tackle it yet, let's not. And then it turns out they did. But then clarifying that concept within our own room, what's procedural dialogue as an umbrella term? We adjusted it to say not just all procedural dialogue, because that exists now through the use of traditional technologies, right? Okay, it's really specifically when Gen AI is used in this way to create performance while the player is playing the game. And it took several tries for some folks. There are some folks who mainly do PCAP and come in and mainly do commercials and other things, who aren't players themselves, who are like, what? Huh? And I'll do my best, but I wind up sounding, I'm not the best at being succinct and soundbitey and, like, first grade level. So it took some tries. And then also just agreeing with employers that we were talking about the same thing took some tries. And I'm grateful that they it was sort of toward the end where they were like, oh, we know what you mean now. And I was like, great, awesome, amazing. It took a lot in this process for sides to exchange dialogue and to actually hear from the other side. Over time, we became much more transparent, not only with the bargaining group, but with the world. Frankly, we were publishing, language from both sides to be really, really clear about what we're trying to talk about in concrete terms. But it took a lot to hear from the other side, I think, from the nature, because they're competitors with each other, and putting things on the record has different stakes for them or something. So, but I do believe it was in one of those, like, at some point it became urgent enough for them as well to kind of do some bit of exchange. And I think that was one of our actual very few back and forth conversations where we nailed that down. And so that particular use case was evolved over time in negotiations, both as it was something that became something to really address, like actually address it all, and then to clarify, and then to agree on. And so that's just one kind of example. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sort of imagining a scenario where I'm imagining a lot of kind of ways to look at it, right? Like, you could be talking through this, and one side or the other could be thinking to themselves, please don't raise this, because I really don't want to have to deal with this, or something. Like, say I don't know, I'm an imaginary company at the table, and I'm working on this tool that, like, that is very specifically about dynamically lip syncing to, like AI generated, literally just lip motion. I'm pointing for the audio people, I'm pointing at my lips. That's all it is. And I don't want that to get bogged down in this. And so I have an incentive to not raise it at all. But because it overlaps with something, like, it's just such an interesting, and because my competitors are at the table and I don't want them getting my lip syncing, my lip tech. Yeah, that can just be complicated. Like, that's an understandably complicated place to be in, and you don't have to be trying to screw anyone over to be there.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sarah, I think hopefully this can be one of the ways that you step out of heavy negotiation world and back into, fun, creative inner child world. I guess I get to ask, what kinds of roles are you hoping to get back to now that this is over? I guess like you said you wanted to, get back to more regular acting and booking gigs. Like what are you kind of hoping for? As I say, as my cat appears on camera interrupting the podcast. So
Hello, kitty cat. There's one specific character that I'd really like to get back to that I sort of didn't go in to work on during the strike, and I don't want to just put them on the spot. I don't know what their plans are for that character moving forward, but I miss it a lot. I love being part of that game. Like there's one specific role that I would love to return to. So that's one answer for sure. Because that world is so fun and really just delightful. And I will say that character too is a kind of character that I've really come to love, and I feel like has been really particular and meaningful to me. And that's a secondary character. It's not in the spotlight. It's just kind of in a corner, literally. But players just sort of enjoy talking to them, and just there's such a particular amount of investment that the player is making in order to interact with that character and to kind of develop fondness for that character. This character fleshes out the world, bit of a conspiracy theorist, bit fascism pilled. You know what I mean? Has some really interesting, funny, sort of endearing personality quirks in a way that maybe can be harder to fit in or advocate for a lead role that has to carry a lot and mean a lot to everybody that's playing the game. And I love that kind of role too, especially mostly because of how much time I get to spend playing that character and working with a team and sort of seeing the amount of, that's for me, that's skin contact. That's oh, I love leads just because I get to work more and spend time in this character. But those little tiny secondary characters that are just a unique feature of games because they ask you to step outside your obvious path to go talk to them, or to spend time with them or invest in them, and yet you've come to kind of understand all their different little nuances and develop affection for them. That's such a gamey thing to me, and such a fun kind of character. So I'm game for anything. I have always loved I've loved being the kind of actor that can be trusted to come in and flesh out a world, because I know what games are, and I love working on them, and I'm experienced at working in them. And I of course love to for the reasons I already mentioned. I love larger worlds too, but I'm really game for anything. I just think that interaction between player and character is so unique and special to games. It's why I chose to focus on them in the first place so intensely in my career. So kind of anything. That's a long-winded way of saying anything.
it's a long-winded way of saying anything, but I do love, describing the weirdo in the corner is also one of my favorite.
I love the weirdo in the corner, dude. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a good answer. I guess, a fun segue, since you obviously can't reveal, who it is. It sounds like, I just
don't want to pressure that team. I think people can probably put together what that is.
Totally, I think I was going to ask who would be a favorite example of that in another game that you've played. I can think of maybe some Mass Effect ones, for instance, if we were just going to pick a broad. But do you have an example from another game that describes this kind of character?
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, if we're just within Mass Effect, I'm trying to think. I mean, why is the reporter that you hit the one that's the opposite. That's a sort of antagonistic feeling. But you remember them.
She has a world built because you don't have to hit her, right? You can
that's
just answer
true.
her
You don't.
questions.
That's true. That's a fact. You don't actually.
You don't have to hit her. And as a journalist, I gotta say, I do like it when a video game acknowledges journalism, even if it's poorly nine times out of 10.
Sure. Yeah. Totally. No. Yeah. What's a favorite little corner character? I don't know why God, this is so funny. My brain is just serving me the weirdest stuff. The little, are they goblins or gnomes, or what are they?
The Volus.
I was actually jumping franchises. I can come back to Mass Effect, but just the most ancillary in Fable. Do you remember those gnomes that you'd hear? They're these. This is a long time ago. Oh my God, I'm so old. But you are. I think you have to hit them or smash them or whatever. But you have to find them, and they're scattered throughout the world, and they just troll you until you do. They're just little gremlin voices, British gremlins, and they're just making fun of you, and they're so funny, and they're so shady, and they're so great. And you have to find them and smash all of them. I think. Who else is a great little side character that you love? I mean.
I do love that example because that's just such one of the weird things of games is you accidentally invent a medium where okay, one of the roles for our thing is it's not a character who wanders through a scene. It's not a crazy person who walks through. We need a library of lines that are firing while the character it's just such a specific
Gamey.
It's so specific is what's strangely gamey about it, is how specific it has to be.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are other examples from Mass Effect or Dragon Age, though. But yeah, but for whatever reason, Fable is just what shot into my brain, just as the most ancillary and the most memorable for me, for some reason.
Yeah. You kind of, I love hearing you sort of talk about, like what draws you to video game voiceover. I guess especially as you and your peers, can get back and kick open the door and get back in the room with some of your friends and peers, on the recording side. What are some of the surprising ways that when you're working with game developers, like what are some of the most interesting or unexpected things that have popped out of recording a character, like solving a problem with the gameplay related or something performance related? I guess when you've worked with game developers, one of those surprising creative interactions that have popped out.
Oh, I think my brain is short on specifics right now. I'll keep trying to think, but the whole thing is a puzzle. That's what I love about it. I think lately I've been making that connection that as someone who loves games and loves puzzle games, the process itself, the collaboration process itself is a puzzle, because there are all these different constraints and needs that are applied, and then you have to find the performance or find the take that is going to serve all of them. And so it has a sort of, I will, as an actor or as a director especially, and then because I've become a director, I think more about it and I volunteer it more readily as an actor now. It's made me more confident and just kind of offering options, and I feel more comfortable. I'm like, hey, there's nothing wrong with offering options. If it's not the one you need, you do something else, or you already have it. It's fine. So it's made me more proactive as a problem solver in the booth. But everything is problem solving. You're like, is this going to as far as coverage, you're like, is this voice print going to work? Is it placed in the right place among the ensemble? And this is something that you need the team to tell you. Is it going to stand out? Is it going to sound too samey to somebody else? That might be a constraint that you have. If it and then in terms of specifics, what is the relationship to this other character that is possible? Are there multiple versions of that, especially if you're talking about an RPG or a BioWare game? There could be multiple versions of that relationship. How do we talk through those and make them consistent? Is this, how do I give you projection levels that are going to fit, that are either going to be a nice happy average for based on gameplay, that's very, very dynamic, or very specifically, do you need an extreme of either end, of something for closer proximity or much further away? The whole process is a puzzle, and the whole process is specific and strange and has sort of a technical layer to it that then has to have an authentic, really owned, artistically, that you have artistic ownership of, and that sounds like it comes from you, that sounds native to you as this character, component to it. So it's that the challenge of video games performance is having that technical layer and then meeting it with something that sounds really effortless and spontaneous, and and that it's not holding that technical goal in mind. And as a director, it's my job to give inspiration or prompts or translation for that process. So if I'm like, hey, it needs to be faster, but faster to an actor is okay. So just now I'm talking faster and that's fine. I'm like, who cares? But it's what you want is oh, you know what? It's really urgent. If you don't get this information to somebody, they might die. If you're in combat, you're you need to pick up the pace. You got to tell them now that missile's coming. That's incoming. You know what I mean? So, so finding motivations, and then part of that puzzle as a director is finding authentic acting motivations for what might be technical constraints. So all of it is weird and strange and magical and stimulating and challenging and joyful. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. When I was in film school, one of the best tips I got from a professor in terms of directing actors for, our humble little projects was try to give notes, not just about adjectives or whatever, faster, meaner, harder, whatever, but was try and communicate something that gives them a space to inhabit, even if it's completely far away from the scene in question. So an example might be, you could say you could tell an actor be angrier, or you could tell an actor imagine as you're reading this line, imagine you just dropped a brick on your foot, but you don't want someone else to know you did. And that is kind of, I've always had that in my mind, when I'm sort of talking. Yeah. Maybe literally drop a brick on their foot. No, that's a set safety thing.
Right. Sure. No, I'm kidding.
No, don't do it. Don't just randomly drop. But yeah, I think people, even, and it's so interesting because more, with such increasingly available technology, not even talking about generative AI technology, but indie devs can now, thanks to the contract, you guys put out, can access, top tier talent that, 10 years ago would have been oh, this doesn't work out for either party, to have this kind of thing working. And I think there's still so much to learn from like there's so much smaller teams and smaller developers can learn that about working with actors and communicating with actors that like surprisingly is just so untapped, and it's just been weirdly behind these different walls because of technology limitations for so much time.
I don't know if it has always been technology. Like so much of my consulting work has been, and that's the thing too, is like the kind of communication and information that is required now around the use of AI specifically in this contract is an extension of the collaboration conversation and the expansion of like awareness of best practices around how to work with actors in general, which has been like a theme of my my advocacy for as long as, I don't know, at least since 2019 or so, or before, is to be like, hey, there's ways of working with actors that are going to make this process more efficient or more enjoyable for you. That's going to get you a better result. And you're going to, and as far as, the union contract side of thing, I'm like, hey, there's this wonderful pool of talent that is experienced in this and whatever that you might really love to work with and can also support that process because they know themselves, they know their work, or they know their instrument, they know this process, and they can assist you actually because of that experience if you're new. So that's like all, but so much of that is information and process. It's actually not technological. And I think that's like, and that's true in the contract too, right? Like the contract doesn't talk about technology. It talks about how you use it. It's a human being who's found a use for this tech, and it's an information exchange, and we want information, and how much are you willing to give? Like that's what's in the contract. It's not like tech logistics. You know what I mean? So that's the big, like sort of that's my constant advocacy thing is like, especially if you are, for example, like a small team wanting to work with union actors, like ask questions. Let me help you find who to talk to. You can talk to me. There is Katie Sikkema is a former SAG-AFTRA business rep who's now a freelance consultant on union best practices and things. I try to put my website needs a massive update. Oh my God! But there are some resources there on like how to schedule. But like how do you schedule actors? Like scheduling actors is a puzzle because we're like available and working on, it's a quilt. We're working on a million different things at once. And so what are the courtesies that that make that possible to schedule things last minute in concert with a bunch of other stuff? So all these things are just information. It's like old-fashioned info. It's a Word document. You know what I mean? But it starts with interest and curiosity and respect. If you have those things, then you can learn these best practices, and then you can have a really satisfying experience working with your actors. That's values, right? That's not technology. So yeah, I mean, I think if you're a small team, and you want to work with union actors, the way that you attract, those rates are lower in the for you to facilitate your budgets. We're talking now about the tiered budget agreement, which discounts session rates if your production budget is lower. Like already up front, that's an information requirement that many larger companies aren't willing to offer, right? They don't want to tell us their budget. And you're like, okay, well then you don't get access to these discounts if you're not willing to, right? So if you are willing to share that information, you can qualify for discounts. But another way that you attract and appeal to experienced talent that might not necessarily be interested in taking and offering you a discount, or they're like, I'm not willing to work, which is a reasonable thing, to work for lower rates. This is my baseline. I need full scale or whatever it might be. But one way to counteract that is to, again, share more information. You're like, when I consult with teams, I'm like, hey, if you're an indie, share a little bit of information about your team, share a little bit about the values of your company, or what you're excited to explore in this game that feels really special to you, really meaningful and personal to you. Like if you share some of that information, it'll make you stand out so much from the secrecy of the rest of the games and auditions that we get, and which are sparse, information wise to begin with, even when they aren't code named or hidden behind NDAs or just whatever. There's so many layers of secrecy. Just someone saying, here's what I am, and me offering myself as an artist to you, inviting you as an artist, or inviting you specifically as an artist because I love your work specifically, and requesting somebody, like adding that personal touch can really help. And this is me now kind of consulting offering, adding that personal touch if you are using the tiered budget agreement, if you're trying to approach really experienced actors who might not otherwise necessarily want to make the time for much lower rates, that can make a huge difference. But it starts with you being aware that that's something valuable that you have to offer and that will make you stand out. So for me, again, like there's all of these different contract pieces and consulting pieces, and the whole conversation is about our how do we build trust that allows us to share information that might be sensitive, as professional communities, and how do we learn to enjoy and to kind of delight in the payoff that you get from that the more that we share with each other.
Absolutely. Would an example be like, let's say like I'm working at a clear obscure, just going to keep popping back in this conversation. Let's say I'm working on a game at about that scale, like whatever. Okay. that I don't know if you've been aware, but like this year has been the talking about the size of the clear obscure team has been major discourse for people.
What was the size of the team?
The core Sandfall is staffed by 33 people, but the credits, especially when you count the voice cast, the total credits in the end, it includes publishers, QA and stuff like external QA. It goes up to 400 people, and I think like there's been a very strange conversation this year about like, well, who is quote essential in making a game, or like how many people do you need to make a game? And I think even the devs at Sandfall are like, I would prefer to not be in the conversation. Like they just sort of got thrust into it. But that's a side tangent to where I was going, which is like, let's say I'm working on a game of about that scale, and for reasons there's secrecy. Maybe there's just a license.
Sure.
Like I can't tell you.
There are reasonable reasons for secrecy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And but then if I come to you and go, hey Sarah, like, we have a character in this game. I can't tell you anything about it, but like when I saw you playing as Corsica in Hi-Fi Rush, I really like, we have a character, or I like how you take this character who goes from, like antagonist who is explicitly an enemy, and how they transition.
Spoilers. Yeah. It's beyond. I'm joking. It's beyond the window.
I'm about to explain the Red Wedding right here to folks if we need to. I am very brutal with spoilers.
No, please, it's fine. I'm just teasing.
You
were inviting me. Yeah.
Yeah, if I send you that invitation, I said, hey, like, this is kind of what inspired me to reach out to you. Like, that's the kind of guidance you're talking about, right? Like, just sort of being able to be, if you can't be specific about your own thing, being specific about the performance that got you excited.
Sure. Yeah. Anything like that. Anything that like adds a personal touch and says, that says, I would love to work with you specifically. Anything that just offers something of yourselves. Like, yeah, I mean, we get so many auditions that are, like I said, codenamed behind, I don't know the dev, I don't know the franchise, I don't know the team. I'm getting dummy sides. Like, I mean, like there's, I have to sign an NDA with rights in it just to even see what might be the thing. And this is like very normal in our industry. And again, like I said, there are reasons for this stuff. There's real costs associated with information leaks. Like that's real. But that being said, anything that makes you that says like, hey, I am going to trust you as a professional to hold this in confidence, and I want you to know this so that I inspire you to give something energized and awake. Like what you want is to trigger inspiration in that actor when they send you this audition. And so information allows them to do that. They're like, oh, that's an interesting hook, or like, oh, that gives me something to imagine, or a person to imagine that is listening to this, right? Because so often we send stuff out there and imagine that no one's listening to it at all. It can vary over time. And I've been doing this, I guess my first game would have been in 2009. Like it can be tough to feel like you're throwing your voice into a void and hearing nothing back ever, which is normal. I mean, we never, so someone who's really said like, hey, I'm excited to hear what you have to put down always gives you a jolt and makes you try harder, explore more thoroughly, or more, sort of like with more of your commitment. Even for folks who have like a practice of giving their best every time, so yeah.
Speaking of, unfortunately, sometimes throwing your voice into a void, obviously in the background of these negotiations, there's been a downturn in the game industry. Whether you measure that in some degree you can measure that in a dip in revenue, you can measure that in layoffs and studio closures. And in the last month, I believe, unfortunately, after Xbox's last layoffs, you've had actors like Elias Tufaxis talking about how when these games are canceled. Games get canceled all the time, right? Like work goes into games and it never sees the light of day, but it feels like actors are being impacted by this in a way that actually isn't discussed as much. I believe Elias was talking about, it was either The Perfect Dark Game or something else, not just about lost future wages from the game, but like days that have been held or something. Like, do you feel that is that something that like you and your peers have been dealing with, I guess? Like, have you heard folks talking about that?
I mean, what that leads my brain to think of is that like, how do I put this? There's a very tricky, games don't have right now, sort of secondary payment based on success for actors, right? And that was not part of our bargaining package. I'm not talking about getting them right now, but I am talking about a secondary effect of that. The secondary effect of that, right, is that you are working session to session, that's all you'll see, that the size of your role matters, that and many of us are so efficient. I finished many games in one session, 4 hours, right? And no matter how successful they were, how much money they made, and I'm not complaining, but I'm saying that like the impact of this is a scarcity mindset and sort of like a brick by brick kind of need. That might be alleviated by that idea that like, oh, we're playing a lottery. As actors, we're always playing a lottery, and it's around success, right? Or a commercial running or something, right? So commercial, you go in and you're like, I recorded that for an hour, and who knows if it runs. But if it runs a bunch, I'm going to get paid for that work after I've done it. And that will allow me to roll the dice on other commercials that don't run, or other things that don't run, or the other things that don't have a secondary, right? Like that was my original business strategy as an actor, going into looking at games and being like, I love games. I want them to be my whole bag. Realistically speaking, I need to diversify. I'm going to look at commercials because they're going to have secondary payments that can maybe allow me to stay available during the business day, which is when voiceover work happens most of the time, and available to do games for love, right? So that scarcity, and the sense of like, of loss of real sessions having a meaningful impact, and no other way of softening that blow or stretching out or being able to it changes what the impact of rolling that dice is. You're always rolling dice, but when one of those dice has like a long-term payoff, it takes the pressure off every other dice roll that you have. But if every dice is like only a set amount, you're going to roll 3, and that's going to be, $1,000 at a time, if you get the roll, and if you get a session, it just creates a much more pressurized environment. And that's why you actually see other forms of secondary income, like cons and autographs and just sort of other appearance stuff, which is also a form of a lottery. You're hoping that character will hit, right? That character will mean something to somebody. And then you're supplementing a day of work, $1,000 to live off of, with, sort of fan interaction, which is really meaningful and joyful. And I think a delightful thing, that technology and just sort of the way that this has evolved has allowed actors to experience the joy of fans and give fans access to people. But it does really pressurize that income stream if the actual work itself that you did that created that connection has a really set, finite, quickly depleted amount of money associated with it.
Yeah, and it's, I can only imagine, someone like Elias who, probably has that work, he's got The Expanse under his belt, he's got Adam Jensen, he's got all these other great roles, because I really like him. I like his work a lot. He's got he has a library of things that he can use for that supplemental income, but then there are probably actors, who are stuck in this position who, like whether it was their first game or whether they're, we're sort of starting to slowly get momentum to be able to make those appearances. A canceled game, there is, even if you don't say the developer has a responsibility to provide that, the fact that it can happen at all is still contingent on, players getting to meet characters. And if characters can't be met because Xbox wasn't going to make enough money this month, he said, getting a little specific, that's rough. That's rough for actors. Like, to sort of, especially when the motivations maybe aren't super clear. Everyone felt like there was something good going on.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's difficult to compare that impact to the loss for the full-time devs on it, right? Like it's challenging to do that. But if you are willing to take that larger view and look at the lottery system that all these actors are playing, where every, right, then it just sort of has a different shade to it, a different color to it, that impact. It's just sort of, we're dealing with a very, very, pressurized kind of scarce possibility space to begin with, I guess, right? So, which forces all these adaptations, which also then, right? So, but yeah, so I guess folks don't talk about it as much. But yeah, I don't know.
It's funny because it also makes me, I also hear that and I think, how come, or I don't know, whenever I ask how come, some part of me is like, why, because it's hard. But like, it almost seems to me like if developers, whether they are of any size, are thinking about this whole, secondary income something effect, like it does feel like building that connection with players is underexplored. And maybe that's because we're all a bunch of introverts, and we're not, there's very facing the public can be hard, but it does sort of feel like actors, have really struck gold on something there, because people like seeing writers, people like seeing artists at cons and stuff. So like, I wonder, I'm in the wondering out loud stage, but I guess I wonder out loud how developers, could build those connections with players and use that to help themselves in their business, I guess, whether it's personal business or company business.
So I think as a labor person, I would like I would love to live in a world where the labor itself and the value that it creates is actually like is connected, like in the work itself, like that pays sustainably. And again, like with the goal of sustainability, I'm not talking about getting like massively rich, but we're actors right now.
One boat will do. One boat is sustainable.
Yeah, right. You know what I mean? Like, let's just talk about I'm looking for what lets me do this the longest and give it the most of my time and energy. That's what I'm looking for, right? And I think that because it is the work that we do that creates that value, it would be nice if that work inherently had that value attached to it over time right? So that's because when you don't have that, it creates this secondary system of adaptations with their own lottery system, with their own risks and vulnerabilities and lack of sustainability, right? So, but if that, and actually both of our lower budget contracts do offer a secondary payment structure. Now it's very doable. It's not every time you sell a copy of a game. It's, a one bonus payment for every 500,000 units sold, or some version thereof, which is, I think, considered by most indies to be a fairly significant success. So it's very manageable, but indies do use that contract. The game developers are like, oh, that makes sense. I don't have money now. If I get money later, I share it with these actors, exchange for giving us this discounted rate, and so that they can continue to do what they love. That sounds fine, actually, which is really beautiful. And I'm so glad that folks are willing to, that's true, that theory that I had would be like, hey, I think indies might be more amenable to this than maybe the bigger companies. And that's true in these cases. And I know of other indies who are talking about much, even more robust secondary payment than that, and are willing to share more, which is really beautiful, and wonderful. And I think that would create a more robust, diverse group of actor specialists who are able to really focus on this from a financial perspective as well as a creative perspective, to give it the time to specialize, to be available, because you hear about it all the time. Like, folks have to take other, PCAP dates, getting, whatever, because someone booked a TV show. You're like, I have to take that job. It's going to pay me so much more. I love games, but like, I got to do that. They have first position, right? So, and then devs are like, what, why? And you're like, well, I need to live. That's all. I just need to live. But in the absence of that, in the absence of getting to that point where that's really scaled and in place and working, then yes, like if you recognize, if you think as a team, you're seeing someone give a really beautiful performance, or you think these characters are really going to hit with someone, then yes, like supporting that, introducing them to the world, creating opportunities for them to engage with fans and to bring that interest back into your game. I'm sure that Baldur's Gate 3 is a really an obvious example of something like that, where it's like, hey, I'm proud of what these people are doing here. I think they're a meaningful value add to this experience. I think that players should know about it, and they should be able to talk and experience these wonderful people that we're working with. Thinking from that, if that's something you're noticing and what you're getting back from your actors, then creating PR opportunities or engagement opportunities with your actors, announcing them, right? Because we don't always get announced or allowed to put things out, right? So then yeah, sharing more of your cast and with the world is welcome as well, and that does facilitate that other secondary income stream of just direct fan interaction.
Yeah, so. And I sort of stepped over you there for a second, but I think there is for readers or listeners who may not fully understand that you do have instances where a trailer will come out for a game, a voice will be in it, and a lot of people will go, oh, that's, I don't know, Sarah Elmaleh, and you'll sort of be sitting there like looking at your email going like, can I be talking about that? I assume that is what you're referring to. Yes, just make sure I'm not putting words in your mouth. Yeah.
I mean, or even, like there and then the case I'm thinking of actually was, I've seen a couple of AAAs now ask you to not even announce, like right now, conventionally speaking, once the game is actually out and you confirm that you're in it, you should be able to talk about it generally. Although teams will give, and actually, no matter what you want as a team, like being specific and clear with your actors about what you want them to do about talking about it or not talking about is great. Whatever it's going to be, that's a minimum that's really appreciated. That's awesome. But I've seen some teams being like, you can't talk about it even though it dropped. And I'm like, but I'm in it. I'm out there. You can hear me. It's out now. No? Okay. All right. I guess I wait. So yeah. And not to again, sort of complain, but like when you compare that to film and TV, you are getting, and you're talking about time and the lottery that you're playing with your life and your career. Once you're announced on a film or TV show, that creates energy and interest in you in a way that you then get to start seeing offers or auditions in that time well before the thing is out. And so when we're talking about, I know devs think about how many games they can make because games take so much and increasingly more of their time in chunks of their life that they can count. It's not on the same order at all, right, as actors, but those are months of your life that you could be using to kind of create more lay more track. So that's something, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. We're heading towards the end of our hour here. And that makes me want to ask you a question that has inadvertently, thanks to Bithell Games founder Mike Bithell, I would love to ask you, we aren't talking about a specific game here, so it's you have a broader pool to work with, but is there someone you would love to sing the praises of, who you haven't gotten to sing the praises of today, whether it's someone you've worked with on something recently, whether it's someone on the team? Like, a fascinating thing about the Games Press space is there is a relationship between people who are sort of public about their work and us and our readers, and then there are people who sort of, for many good reasons, don't get that same space. And then, you know, we have a little window here to sort of say, hey, who should our readers and listeners know about that they don't know about?
Oh, interesting.
That's kind of always a fun part.
That's interesting. Right. I was going to be like, I love my committee and I want to shout them out. And also like our staff, we're amazing. I want to shout them out. But you mean kind of like maybe work that they can go to experience.
Could be committee, could be an actor, could be a performance director. Like, who would you like to sing the praises of before you leave today?
I will say that I managed to audition. I made myself, I'm like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to audition. And I auditioned and I worked on one interim game. And that would be, so a game that agreed to our terms during the strike. And we're like, hey, this is all fine as is, like from a year ago. The terms that SAG-AFTRA wanted are fine with us. That's totally gravy. And I got to work on Supervive with Theorycraft and with Josh Dean as a director, who I love as a director. And in the middle of this really difficult experience and challenging, strike experience, the day of work of having a team who was like, you've set this boundary or you've asked for this need, and we're totally great to meet you there. The relief, the lightness in that room, in that work, the joy of getting to work with a team who is just so sweet and open to my suggestions. And like I said, that puzzle solving that we were all doing together that felt like teamwork, where some, director has idea, dev has idea, I have idea, we all find what works and lay down coverage, was so affirming. And so it just felt like this bubble of safety and peace and joy and like, yeah, it felt like promise, and it felt like hope. So that character is out. You can play as her. She's probably one of the more like openly sexual characters that I've ever played, which was very wild. It's been a while since anyone let me flirt. I was like, oh, that's fun. I never get to flirt. So I will shout out that team, because that working experience during this action meant the world to me. It felt like the future path of life in this industry that I was hoping to build. So
yeah, and hope, like not to over be schmaltzy or anything, but hope is not always easy to build in different contexts, whether it's the world or your own life, or when the question of your profession is on the line. Like hope comes in many forms and for many reasons, and it's very nice to hear that some of these folks could offer that in a time like this. So yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I think like if anyone hasn't watched Andor, watch Andor. I don't know. This is not like this is a video game podcast, and I don't know what I'm doing. But like it was a harrowing watch for me and a really meaningful watch for me. It felt, again, we're not talking about actual life and death stakes, but that being said, the praxis of building a resistance and trying to create compromise and effective teamwork and chain of command, and just like how to operate as a team against a force that seems much larger than yourself, there's a lot there to that I felt was reflected in whatever. And, like they say, rebellions are built on hope, and but then you also need the follow through, the diligence, the grueling, the detail, the resilience, the patience, all of that other stuff. So, but the hope is the first part. You have to see it and you have to imagine it to be true, that you can set a boundary and someone will meet you there. Before it happens, and then you have to kind of build toward it. And so you can't skip it. You're not going to do that work. You're not going to survive that grueling process of resistance and detail work and all of that other stuff if you don't have the imagination to believe that it's possible. And then you start to see, and then you start to see these sparks of evidence that it's true. And so every game that signed our our interims, I think, offered that hope to people. I think that folks, actors in this space who hadn't really thought about, who maybe weren't used to setting boundaries for themselves. I think game actors, for all the reasons I said, we've become very adaptive by nature. We are humbled by the game process where we can't see everything. We're just sort of offering things in vulnerability and hoping they work for you. We are offering things in vulnerability and hoping that a character hits or whatever it might be. So to have that experience of like, we set a boundary and we had it met, even if it wasn't perfect, or we had working experiences where people did that tangibility, the tangible expression of that hope played out as true and as possible is incredibly important and meaningful. And I hope it's something that actors and developers and everyone, every worker takes away from this experience, is that it's something that you can hope is necessary. You have to see it first, and you can build to it. It can play out for you if you do the work. So yeah.
Sarah, thanks so much for your time. It was great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Listeners, please be proud of me. The second Sarah started talking about Andor, I was in danger of turning this into the Game Developer Star Wars podcast. Who knows? Maybe we'll do something like that next May 4th. A huge thanks to Sarah Elmaleh for coming on the podcast today. You can follow her on Bluesky at selmaleh.bsky.social. To learn more about the ratified Interactive Media Agreement, you can visit SAG-AFTRA.org. For more from us at Game Developer, please be sure to visit www.gamedeveloper.com. Follow us on major social platforms and subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find me on Bluesky at bryantfrancis.me. Today's episode was edited by Pierre Landriau. Our theme music is by Mike Meehan. Wherever you are, I hope you find the hope you need to get through this week. And remember this, try.